Good morning, ladies. Welcome to our Wednesday morning weekly Tanya Shaar. We're studying Shaar, Hayichud v'Ho'emuna. We are approaching the end of Perek Zayin. Perek Zayin is a long perek and with many beautiful ideas. A significant percentage of Shaar Hayichud v'Ho'emuna is Perek Zayin. We're headed toward the end. If you have the English, Tanya in front of you, we're on the lessons in Tanya were on page 931 at the top of the page. If you have the Hebrew Tanya, we're on Daf Pei Daled, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, the beginning of the 8th line by the word Memmalle Kol Almin. So what we're learning about here is a quote from a section in Zohar called Tikkunei Zohar. Tikkunei Zohar in describing the Rebbeinu Shalom, describing Hashem, says Lei Sasar Poni Minei. There's no place that is vacant of Hashem, not in the higher worlds, not in the lower worlds. And there it says in Raya Memmalle, in a different section of Zohar called Raya Memmalle, Parshas Pinchas, by the way, which is connected, of course, to this week, which is Parshas Pinchas. Everything Vashkocha Pratis. So in Raya Memmalle, Parshas Pinchas, it says that the Rebbeinu Shalom, the Eibashter, is Sovev Kol Almin and Memmalle Kol Almin. That the Rebbeinu Shalom surrounds all worlds and fills all worlds. Or in the words of the Raya Memmalle, Iu Tofis B'Koila V'Leis Man de Tofis Bei. That Hashem, the Eibashter, has a grasp on everything, and nothing has a grasp on Hashem. Okay, so Chassidus speaks a lot about this concept that Hashem is referred to as Sovev Kol Almin and Memmalle Kol Almin. What does each one mean? And really, I think the first explanation is here in Shaar Hayichud v'Ho'emuna, on this concept again that Hashem is both Sovev Kol Almin and Memmalle Kol Almin, surrounding all worlds and filling all worlds. Last week, we learned a lot about the idea of Sovev Kol Almin. The Sovev Kol Almin is the Sovev Kol Almin is that godly force, if you will, that godly element, that elokus, that's referred to as that surrounds all worlds, meaning it impacts the world. Alter Rebbe writes that it's responsible for the existence of the world, but it impacts the world in such a way that the world doesn't relate, the world doesn't understand it. Existence cannot be toifeset, meaning existence cannot process it in a way that it can digest it, it can put a handle on it because it's not limited, but yet at the same time it is responsible for the existence of the world and everything inside. Okay. Now this week we're going to learn about the other side, what's referred to as the Eibashter being Memmalle Kol Almin, the Eibashter filling all worlds. So last week I spoke too much and then ran short on time, so this week I'll read a few lines inside and then with Hashem's help we'll try to understand and explain. Memmalle Kol Almin, when we say that Hashem fills all worlds, He bechinas hachayes hamislabeshes toich etzem hanivra. This is the life force of Hashem that encloses itself, that is mislabesh in the very essence of the nivra, in the very essence of the created being. She mitzumtzemes betoiches. So unlike Sovev Kol Almin, unlike Sovev Kol Almin, which doesn't experience tzimtzum, at least this is the conventional understanding. The Sovev Kol Almin does not go through tzimtzum. Sovev Kol Almin is that, let's say, Gilui Elokus, that light of Hashem that isn't being mitzamtzem, that isn't constricting and confining itself to the existence of the world. It just exists. In fact, quite the contrary. The world exists within Sovev Kol Almin. Memmalle Kol Almin, on the other hand, is that chayas hamislabeshes, that life that encloses itself in the very essence of every created being. She mitzumtzemes betoiche, that this light, this elokus, constricts itself and restricts itself, but tzimtzum rav, in a great tzimtzum, in accordance with the type of existence of this created being. She balgvul, every created being is balgvul v'tachlis, has limitations and has an end, b'kamusay ve'echusay, both in quantity and in quality. Every created being has limitations. Dahainu ma'alosay, its greatness, v'chashivusay, and its significance, everything is limited. So within the limitation of every created being that's brought into existence has a godly life force, has a godliness that encloses itself within the limited existence of this created being through many tzimtzummim, and this is called Memmalle Kol Almin. And Memmalle Kol Almin sits with the specific limitations of the created being in its limitations in quality and quantity. Kagoin Hashemesh, and the Alter Rebbe gives an example, although it's maybe a little difficult to understand why an example is necessary, but he gives an example nevertheless. Kagoin Hashemesh, for example, the sun, Shegufa yeshloi gvul v'tachlis, that the sun has a certain limitation. It has a certain definition. B'kamusai, in how big it is, its quantity, its size. Shu k'moi kuf samach zayin pa'omim k'goydel kador oretz. It's approximately 167 times the size of the earth. Ve'echusai, and its quality, umalosai, and its greatness, hu oirei, which is its light. Gamkin yeshloi gvul, the light of the sun, says the Alter Rebbe, is also limited. Ad kama yuchal lahoir, how far can the sun shine? Ki lo yor lebilti tachlis, the sun cannot shine infinitely, because the sun is a created being, right? So how far away does the light of the sun go? At some point it ends. If you go far enough from the sun, you won't be able to see the sun. That means the light of both the sun itself is limited, and the light of the sun is limited. And so it is with every created being. It has a certain limitation. Chazal tell us that if one were to walk from the oretz, from the ground, l'rakia, to the sky, it would take 500 years, whatever that means. But the point Alter Rebbe wants from it is that every created being is limited and defined. So the godly life force that's enclosed in them, he bebchinas tzimtzum rav, is in a great tzimtzum rav otzim, in a great and powerful tzimtzum. Because it needs this godly force needs firstly tzamtzum, to constrict itself, tzimtzummim rabim v'atzumim, many great and powerful tzimtzummim, until it can create the very essence of the created beings, limited and defined created beings. Okay, let's stop over there and let's try to explain. So I want to give 2 points of explanation. One is a mashal from the Rebbe, and the other one is just, again, to go back to explain the idea of tzimtzum, and based on that, why this idea of tzimtzum is so incredibly important that Alter Rebbe is talking about this over here. Maybe that will be enough for today. We'll see how we do. So let's start with the Rebbe's mashal. All right? So this mashal, I don't know, maybe I mentioned it before, maybe not. It's a mashal of the Rebbe. The Rebbe used this mashal in a letter. He wrote this mashal in a letter, in which the Rebbe speaks about how we have to go in the path of the Rabbeim. Right? So the Rabbeim taught us Chassidus, they taught us to serve Hashem, they taught us, all sorts of things. And we have to follow their path. We got to follow their ways. Lehidamos, to align ourselves as much as possible with the Rabbeim. Okay. So in this letter, the Rebbe asks the obvious question. Not that the answer is particularly difficult to understand, but the question is nevertheless obvious. And the Rebbe articulates it as this question is articulated in Tanya and other places, and etc. So the question obviously is, what do you mean we have to li'damos, we have to align ourselves with the Rabbeim, we have to, sort of get in line, follow their teachings, etc. How can you compare us to the Rabbeim? To say that the difference between us and the Rabbeim is infinite is an embarrassment to infinity, right? Even infinity is nothing compared to the distance between us and the Rabbeim. So what is it? You tell me, a simple, puny guy, living somewhere on planet Earth, that I have to follow the ways of the Rabbeim, and even more, Chazal tell us, one has to cleave to Hashem. But in this letter, the Rebbe was writing about the Rabbeim. The Rabbeim are, infinite divine powers, and me, I'm a very simple, puny, little person. How can you tell me that I should follow the path of the Rebbe? This is a question the Rebbe asks in the letter. in a letter. So sometimes the Rebbe answers, what do you mean? You have a neshama, and by virtue of your neshama, you're a chelik alakami mal mamash, etc. Don't think of yourself as small and puny and insignificant, etc. Quite the contrary, you can change the whole world. Okay, that's often the approach. In this approach, the Rebbe takes in this letter, the Rebbe takes a different approach. It's true, the Rebbe says, we really are small and puny and limited, or there are parts to us, let's say, that are really small and puny and insignificant, etc. And when we say that a person has to follow and emulate the Rabbeim, we're talking about even that part of us that's so incredibly small. Now, how? So Rebbe gives a mashal. Rebbe gives a mashal for this. Open your hearts. Here's the Rebbe's mashal. Says the Rebbe, the sun is, well, in the words of the Alter Rebbe here in Tanya, 167 times the size of the entire planet Earth. The light of the sun shines, God knows how many light years, and each light year is 180,000 miles a second or something like that. Talk about the sun is an incredibly powerful and awesome Nivra, created being that Hashem created. Maybe, I'm just saying this on my own. The Rebbe doesn't say this, I'm adding. Maybe the sun is an icon of a limited created being, but the greatest, most powerful thing that Hashem created in our physical reality is the sun. Maybe not, I don't know, whatever. Let's go with it. And yet the Rebbe says, you see an interesting thing, that when there is a body of water, so the body of water has the power somehow, the body of water has the power to reflect the entire sun. So not just if you look at the sun, you can see it, but even if there is a body of water, so the body of water reflects the sun. If you look at it, you can see, you can't see the sun unless you look at the sun, which is not that healthy. But if you look at the body of water, you can see the entire sun being reflected there in the body of water. No, beside it. Very fine. No, so what? Says the Rebbe, think about it. The body of water, the ocean, the sea, the river, the lake, whatever it is, if the entire planet Earth is a 167th the size of the sun, so imagine one ocean, one river, one lake. You're talking about, if it's an ocean, it's 20-30% of that. If it's a river, it's 1% of that. It's a lake. You're talking about mamash. To the extent the Rebbe says that even one drop of water, even just a drop, just a single droplet, yesh b'koichoi, somehow, this droplet of water, if you look into it, if you look at the droplet and the sun is shining, you'll be able to see the entire sun reflected in this droplet of water. That's the Rebbe's mashal. A Rebbe Shemoshel. What's the nimshal? All of us, perhaps. Again, there are parts to us that may be very small, perhaps no larger than a droplet of water, compared to the Rabbeim, who are like the sun itself. And yet, says the Rebbe, don't let your Yetzer Hara convince you that because we're small, or there are parts to us that are small and insignificant, therefore we're incapable. Look, even a tiny droplet of water, yesh b'koichai, somehow has this power, has this atomic gift, this ability to contain within itself a reflection of the entire sun. Memmalle, says the Rebbe, don't tell me I'm small. How can I be compared? How can I align myself with the Rabbeim? If even a droplet of water can contain within itself a reflection of the entire sun, then every one of us has to somehow reflect the entire Rebbe. Okay. As if that's not powerful enough, the Rebbe adds, he says, but, says the Rebbe, there's two conditions. There are two qualities necessary in order for this droplet of water to contain a reflection of the entire sun. In the language of Chassidus, this is a very powerful idea. The fact that a drop of water can contain a reflection of the entire sun, it's not just stam v'mazakt, an idea that the sun reflects. The Rebbe is seeing this not just as an ability, as something which comes from the sun. The Rebbe is seeing this as an ability, the droplet of water. The droplet of water, somehow also has bekoichai to contain within itself a reflection of the entire sun. Two conditions. Number one, the drop of water has to be pure. It has to be clean. The water's got to be clean, because if it's muddy or murky, or if the water is dirty or cloudy in some way, then the sun is not going to reflect in it. Now you'll say to yourself, I don't understand. We're talking about the sun is hundreds of thousands of times the size of this droplet of. What's the difference? The water's clean, the water's not. As far as the sun is concerned, there's no difference. But in order for this droplet of water to be, let's call it a keli, to be a keli that it should be able to contain within itself a reflection of the entire sun, the drop of water needs to be clean. So the Rebbe says, you clean your side of the street. You make sure that your little droplet of water is sparkling clean. And then you'll be able to reflect the sun, the Rebbe himself. That's condition number one. Condition number two, the Rebbe says, it's only going to work if there's a direct line between the drop of water and the sun. And nothing is in between. If something gets in between, doesn't matter what it is, a tree, an ant, a bird, a house, a building, a planet, a cloud, whatever. Whether large or small, if something gets in between the droplet of water and the sun, then the droplet of, again, as far as the sun is concerned, it doesn't matter. But the droplet of water is now not going to be able to contain within itself a reflection of the sun, because the hiskashrus, the connection is not healthy. There's something has gotten in between the droplet of water, the droplet of water and the sun, and so it's not going to work. Okay, why am I saying this? Maybe in a small way. This is a mashal for the idea that Alter Rebbe is talking about over here with this concept of Memmalle Kol Almin. Where the idea of Memmalle Kol Almin, as Alter Rebbe is explaining over here, is not simply to just say that Hashem has the ability to create small things. Hashem has the ability to create limited things. What's the big deal about that? Hashem can do anything. Right? Hashem can create, even though Hashem has no limitation at all, Hashem can create things that are limited. Nu mazel tov. Nu, so what do you want? So if that would be the case, we wouldn't refer to Hashem as Memmalle Kol Almin. Even though Hashem created it, we still wouldn't refer to Hashem as Memmalle Kol Almin. Memmalle Kol Almin means that the essence, the very unlimited, infinite part of Hashem, somehow manages, Memmalle Kol Almin, to fill, to saturate every created being, even created beings with tremendous limitations. Now this is a tremendous chiddush, this is a great novelty. How do we say that the same Eibishter that is Sovev Kol Almin, the same Eibishter that is beyond all worlds, that is so not defined, so not able to be captured, to be contained within the world, that same Eibishter is not just creating the world, but is filling all worlds, is manifest within every single detail of creation. Like I'm saying, the entire sun can be found in a drop of water. So in the mashal, it's not the sun itself that's in the drop of water, it's the sun itself it's just a reflection, right? And the reflection is taka small enough. The chiddush is that there can even be a reflection. That itself is enough of a chiddush, and that's why the Rebbe uses it as a mashal. But in the Nimshal, we'd have to say, when we say that the Eibishter is Memmalle Kol Almin, we'd have to say not just that the drop of water can reflect the entire sun, but the drop of water can contain the entire sun, or in better words, that the entire sun can exist within every droplet of water. That's what Memmalle Kol Almin means. Memmalle Kol Almin means that same Elokus that is infinitely beyond the world in such a way that nothing in the world can ever contain it, grasp it, or understand it. That godliness, that Elokus, exists within the specific nuances and fibers and atoms of every limited being that Hashem has created. This is called Memmalle Kol Almin. Okay, so what's the explanation? Right? So what's the explanation? So do we just want to say that Hashem can do anything? Right? And therefore Hashem did it. That doesn't require much explanation at all. So Hashem did it. So besides the mazel tov, so what do I take from this? So to explain how Hashem does it, the Alter, again, as much as we can on our limited level understand, the Alter Rebbe goes back to the concept of Tzimtzum. Now, Tzimtzum was discussed at great length. We learned it together in Perek Daled of Shaar Hayichud ve'Emunah, right? Because concept, this idea, this power of Hashem of Tzimtzum. So here he's coming back to it, and he repeats a few times over and over again. Tzimtzum Rav, V'otzum, Tzimtzummim Rabim Atzum, these Tzimtzummim, these constrictions which are great and which are powerful. We're going back to Tzimtzum to understand this concept of Memmalle Kol Almin. Okay. So let's just go back and remind ourselves a little bit what's the meaning of this concept of Tzimtzum and how this helps us understand the idea of Memmalle Kol Almin. So the mashal in general in Chassidus, to understand the concept of Tzimtzum, is many mashalim are given, right? Again, we spoke about this, would be, let's say, for example, a teacher and a student. So a teacher has a tremendously lofty idea that they'd like to explain to the student, or that they'd like to teach. The teacher has their perception, their way of understanding. The challenge is that the student will not understand what the teacher is saying. Either the student won't understand anything the teacher is saying, or the student will get confused, right? Like we learned last week, whatever the case may be. But the teacher has this perception that will be lost on the student, right? The teacher is the Rogachover Gaon. And he's learning a simple piece of Gemara with a bunch of, sort of very simple-minded people. So the the way people mistakenly sometimes understand Tzimtzum. And now how is the teacher going to teach the student? How is the teacher going to? How is a Rebbe going to teach Chassidim? Right, a great mashal, by the way, for Soiv Kol Almin and Memmalle Kol Almin is a Rebbe. Maybe we'll get to that soon. Right, Rebbe is a mashal for Soiv Kol Almin and Memmalle Kol Almin. I'm writing it down so I don't forget. How is the teacher going to teach the student? So the answer is Tzimtzum. The teacher has to be Metzamtzum himself. The teacher has to confine and constrict himself. So people sometimes mistakenly understand this concept that what? That the teacher says to himself, okay, if I teach the student the way I understand the Gemara, the student's going to get confused, or the student's not going to know what I'm talking about. So I have to put that aside and teach the student in a way that the student will understand. What is this? The student can understand the question, the answer, the simple structure on the most literal and the most simple of ways. We'll teach that to the student. Gesundheit. This is a terrible mistake for two reasons. Number one, if that's the case, then you don't need this great teacher to be metzamtzem himself to learn with the student. And in fact, we'd be better off if we weren't working with such a big gun, with such a great, wise person in the first place. We'd be better off working with somebody who's basically on the same level as the student, basically the same level as the student, maybe just a little bit a drop higher, so that they can teach the student basically on their level. And the second problem with this approach is that if that's the case, then how's the student ever going to get to the teacher's level? Never. If the teacher, instead of teaching, so we're stuck here in a catch-22. If the teacher will teach the way the teacher understands, then the student will understand nothing. The student might even not even know that he's understanding nothing because the gap between them is so vast. The student will not understand what the teacher is saying. Or even worse, the student will think he doesn't understand what the teacher is saying. And if the teacher teaches the student on the student's level, if the teacher taka lowers himself to the student's level, so what? So maybe he'll lower himself not mamish to the student's level, a drop better, beseder. But then number one, all that wealth of knowledge of the teacher is not available to the student. And number two, the student is going to remain stuck there. And yet the Gemara says that after 40 years, the student reaches the level of the teacher. Chassidus says that's right. Because Tzimtzum doesn't mean that the teacher, in the case of the teacher, that the teacher removes from his mind that part of the understanding that the student is not capable of, and he leaves that as being inaccessible to the student, and then just teaches the student what the student is capable of. That's not what Tzimtzum is. Tzimtzum is that the teacher finds a way to take what he does understand and communicate all of that to the student, put it, let's say, bite-sized pieces, right? Cut it down to put it in such a way that the student can understand a little bit of what the teacher is saying, but hidden, but contained in the DNA of what the teacher is actually giving the student is all the understanding of the teacher. It's like a hook. That's Tzimtzum. Tzimtzum is like a hook, where the teacher is able to take all of the wealth of his own knowledge and understanding, which right now the student has no idea what that is, and the student is not capable of knowing what it is. The student is not capable of knowing what it isn't. Nothing. And somehow the teacher, this is the power of Tzimtzum. Alter Rebbe calls it Tzimtzummim, Rabim va'atzumim, tremendously powerful Tzimtzummim. The teacher is somehow able to package that, to funnel that, to present it in such a way that he'll give it to the student. The student will understand what it is that the teacher is saying on the student's level right now, but as the idea sits in his head and germinates, it opens. The student is able to develop the idea, and discover all the hidden layers that the teacher has placed there. That's Tzimtzum. Right, that's why I like the mashal of the sun being reflected in a drop of water, because the idea here is that, again, in the mashal it's just a reflection. In the nimshal it's a tzimtzum. That means the actual entire sun itself is able to invest itself into a drop of water. With time, the drop of water can expand until it becomes as big as the sun itself. The Frierdiker Rebbe, listen to this. The Frierdiker Rebbe once said, open your hearts. The Frierdiker Rebbe once said, how does a child, the Frierdiker Rebbe said like this, the whole Torah, the entire Torah, Torah Shebechsav, Torah Shebal Peh, Chumash, Chassidus, Halacha, Navi, Midrashim, Gemara, everything, is all contained within Torah Shebechsav, of course. All of Torah Shebechsav is contained within Chumash. All of the Chumash is contained on a microscopic level, if you will, within the Aser Sadibros. The entire Aser Sadibros can be rooted, their root there can be traced back to the first two of the 10 that we heard from Hashem directly. The first two can be traced to the first. The first one can be traced to the first word, Anochi. And the Anochi can be traced to the first letter of the word Anochi, which is O. Says the Frierdiker Rebbe, listen to this. Says the Frierdiker Rebbe, when a child starts learning Torah at the age of 2, 3, whatever it is, what's the first thing that a Jewish child learns when they begin their process of Jewish education? Day one. The first thing they'll learn is Kometz Aleph O. Kometz Aleph O. Said the Frierdiker Rebbe, what's the difference between a malamed, between a teacher who is a Yira Shamayim, who fears God, a God-fearing teacher, and Chas v'Shalom not? You know what it is? He said, I'll tell you. If it's not a God-fearing, if it's not a Yira Shamayim, a malamed, then Kometz Aleph O is Kometz Aleph O. It's a sound, that's all it is. It's the first sound the child will learn. With time, the child will learn other sounds, and then to be able to combine the sounds, and then to be able to read until they can absorb some type of wisdom and some type of content. For now, all it is just a dead sound. That's if the teacher is not a Yira Shamayim. But if the teacher is a Yira Shamayim, then that O, Kometz Aleph O, is the Kometz Aleph O, which is short, which is an abbreviation for Anochi. And Anochi is abbreviation for the first of the 10 Dibros. And the first of the 10 is an abbreviation for the first two. And the first two is an abbreviation for all 10. And all 10 are an abbreviation for Torah Shebechsav. And Torah Shebechsav is an abbreviation for Torah Shebal Peh. And everything, it's all contained. But Tzimtzum Rav V'otzum. If the teacher is a Yira Shamayim, then the teacher will put the entire essence of the Eibashter and Torah and 3,500 years of Jewish history and 7 Rabbeim and Chassidus and everything into that O. You want a human mashal for this? I'll give you a human mashal for this. A newborn baby is being fed by his or her mother. How much can the newborn baby eat? They can't eat anything. How much can the newborn baby drink? 2-3 ounces, that's it. 2-3 ounces of milk, that's all the baby can have. More than that is not good. Too much, the baby can throw it up. 2-3 ounces a couple of times a day, that's how much the baby can handle. When a mother gives her newborn baby 2 or 3 ounces of milk, somebody from the outside will look at it and go, what is this? What's the big deal? Nothing, right? Nothing. What? 2-3 ounces of milk. Try asking the mother if she would mind if someone else gives the baby these 2-3 ounces of milk. Very often the mother will say, no, it needs to come from me. Why? Why? 2 ounces of milk. Inside those 2 ounces of milk is the entire essence of the mother. That's a mashal for Tzimtzum. She's managed to nurse her baby, to nurture her baby, to give him or her life. At this moment, right now, all the baby can handle is 2 ounces of milk. And the entire essence of the mother is given in these 2 ounces. That, my dear friends, is what Alter Rebbe means when Alter Rebbe says here. That when we say that Eibishter is Memmalle Kol Almin, when we say that Eibishter fills the world, we don't just mean that the Eibishter created limited beings. No! The Eibishter invested his entire essence, the entire essence that is Sof of Kalma, that is so much beyond the world, that is manifest and present within the tiniest fiber of existence. That's the reason why, if you look in our Yom Yom, I believe in Chav Ches, the 28th day of Cheshvan, you can look this up. The Rebbe writes there like this. The Rebbe writes that the concept of Hashgacha Pratis is not just that Hashem is overlooking the tiniest movement of a single blade of grass in the wind. That's not what Hashgacha Pratis. That's not all Hashgacha Pratis means. It's true. Hashem is supervising. One blade of grass is moving in the wind, azoy or azoy, half a millimeter this way, half a millimeter that way. It's Hashgacha Pratis. But the Rebbe says that's not the real meaning of Hashgacha Pratis. What's the real meaning of Hashgacha Pratis? This is what he says. Listen to this. Listen to this. Listen to this. That in the entire purpose of creation, Dira B'Tachtonim, 5,784 years of history, Kriyas Yamsuf, Matan Torah, Hashem choosing the Jewish people, all the billions of people that exist on planet Earth, Doimim, Tsameach, Chai, Medaber, everything that the Eibishter created from the beginning till the end, in order for it to reach its purpose, in order for all of it to reach the purpose for which Hashem created it, it's necessary for this blade of grass to sway in the wind exactly this amount. Half a millimeter more to the right or to the left, and the whole experience of Dir B'Tachtonim, 5,784 years of history, and everything that was entailed, is meaningless. Is meaningless. It's everything or nothing. Down to the movement of a blade of grass in the wind. Why? Because it's Hashgacha Pratis. So what? So why does Hashgacha Pratis mean that? Because Hashgacha Pratis doesn't mean that Hashem is watching from the side, right? Hashem like a mashgiach. The mashgiach is standing over there and the food is over here and the mashgiach is watching. No, that's not pshat. The pshat of Hashgacha Pratis is that the Eibishter himself is invested in it with his entire essence. Now you'll say, why is Hashem investing his entire essence in a blade of grass? Good question. The only answer we have is Dira B'Tachtonim. But that's not the point. We're not supposed to take the point from this that Hashem is invested in the blades of grass. The point we take from this is that Hashem is invested in us, in every fiber of our existence. All right. On a human level, by the way, another mashal for this is the relationship between a Rebbe and a Chassid, where a Rebbe is a mashal for something which is, let's say, Sof of Kol Almin and Memmalle Kol Almin, meaning what? On the one hand, the Rebbe is Sovev Kol Almin, right? The Sovev Kol Almin means the Rebbe is responsible for everything that goes on in the world, and the Rebbe is responsible for all Yidden and all Yiddishkeit and all of Jewish history and to bring Mashiach and the whole thing, on the one hand. On the other hand, the Rebbe is invested in every chassid individually. And people who went by the Rebbe will tell you they had this experience, and if you watch the videos, you could see it. When the Rebbe is paying attention to a particular Yid, the entire essence of the Rebbe is invested in this Yid. So you'll think to yourself, okay, so it's like what? It's like the Rebbe has different modes, right? When he's taking care of the world, he's taking care of the world. When he's talking about Israeli politics, he's talking about Israeli politics. When he's teaching a Maimar Chassidus, he's teaching, bringing godly revelations. When he's blowing shofar, sustaining the world for the year, etc. When he talks to me, it's me. But when he talks to me, he invests himself in me completely. No. The pshat is, when the Rebbe talks to me and to you, and invests himself in me and you, he's Memmalle Kol Almin. That's the same Rebbe that's blowing shofar on Rosh Hashanah, and that's taking care of all the world's problems, and that carries upon himself 3,500 years of Jewish history and 5,784 years of the creation of the world. When he looks at every one of us and says, you can bring Mashiach, you can make a difference, when the Rebbe looks at every one of us and says he believes in us, that means he's investing in us his entire essence. He's Memmalle Kol Almin. He invests his entire essence in every single one of us. All right. I wrote down here one more story to tell you, then we'll call it a day. So it's known that in the 20s, in the early years of the Frierdiker Rebbe's Nasias, so he was facing, he was battling to save Yiddishkeit in Russia, in the former Soviet Union, battling the Soviet government, the oppression of religion in general, and of Yiddishkeit and him specifically. So he was known that the Frierdiker Rebbe was keenly aware of the type of regime he was waging war with. And the Frierdiker Rebbe knew that this was going to require Mesiras Nefesh. So the Frierdiker Rebbe, called in 9 Hasidim, and he made with them what he referred to as a Krisus Bris. This is very famous. He made with them a covenant, and he said to them, we're going to throw ourselves at this initiative, at this mission of saving Yidden and Yiddishkeit in Russia. We're going to throw ourselves at it with Mesiras Nefesh, and we're going to go ad tipas dam achroina, till the last drop of blood. And he said, together, you are 9, and together with me we're a million. And basically they swore in the name of God, in the name of everything holy, that they were, this was a one-way train, that they were going in, and they were going in, all the way. And some of them actually, in the end, Rahman al-Islam died, al-Kiddush Hashem. The Frierdiker Rebbe himself was arrested with a death sentence over his own head. And when he was arrested, there was a couple of days where the Hasidim did not know if he was alive or not. It's very famous. I'll tell you something that's a little less famous. So, because every good story has an epilogue, has what happens after the story. So at some point, the Hasidim left the room. These 9 Hasidim, they left the room. Now, of course, they'd never seen the Frierdiker Rebbe speak that way. They'd never heard this type of language from any Rebbe ever. They understood that that there's a lot riding on this. When they left, they sent a message in through one of the Frierdiker Rebbe's secretaries to tell him that they were afraid. They're scared. Not, God forbid, going back on their pledge. Not, God forbid, going back on their commitment, on the Mesiras Nefesh. But scared. Basically facing a firing squad. They told the Frierdiker Rebbe that they are scared, and the secretary communicated the message. The Frierdiker Rebbe responded. He said he doesn't understand how it's possible that they could be afraid. I don't understand, says the Frierdiker Rebbe. How is it possible that you could be afraid? What's the problem? What do you mean? You don't understand how it's possible you could be afraid? You just made us swear that we would die for this. So he gave a mashal. He said in a human being, emotions come from the heart. The heart is capable of feeling all sorts of different emotions. When the heart feels an emotion from the heart, it spreads all over the body. When a person is happy, the legs will dance, the brain will open up, the arms will be generous, whatever. You're happy. When a person is, let's use the example, fearful, right? The legs will shake, the hands will tremble, the person will sweat, whatever. But the emotions are always coming from the heart. From the heart, they spread everywhere else. But there isn't any other part of the body that has its own ability to experience emotions other than the heart. Whatever emotion is going on, it's got to come from the heart itself. Says the Friedrich Rebbe, I'm the heart. I'm the heart of Klal Yisrael. I'm the heart of my Chassidim. You guys, my Chassidim, you're my arms, my legs, my limbs, etc. Says the Friedrich Rebbe, if I'm not afraid, how is it possible that you would be afraid? It doesn't make any sense. How could the hands be scared? How could there be fear in the arms if there's no fear in the heart? There's no such thing. It doesn't exist. You think you're afraid, says the Friedrich Rebbe. I'm telling you, you're not. Because I'm your heart. Check in with me. I'm your heart, and I'm telling you, there's no fear. There's no fear in me. If there's no fear in me, there's no fear in you. Ah, says the Friedrich Rebbe, but you feel like you are afraid. You feel like you are. So the hand is trembling, but there's no fear in the heart. What's the pshat? We must say that there's something lacking in connection between the hand and the heart. Perhaps the connection is not right. If you fix the connection, then the lack of fear in the heart will be manifest in the hands. Memmalle says the Friedrich Rebbe to his secretary, go tell my Chassidim to stop worrying about their fear and start focusing on their hiskashus and their connection to me. Once their connection to me is open and healthy, the lack of fear in me will flow through into them and will carry them through. That's the story. Incredibly powerful story. But that's the story. In this case, what Alter Rebbe is saying here is, and this is the takeaway for every one of us, the takeaway for every one of us is that if we ever consider ourselves small or, limited in some sense, and say, hey, the Eibishter made me limited, and the Eibishter did, we want you to know, says Toras Chassidus Chabad, that the very essence of the Eibishter, V'hinei Hashem nitzav alav, right? Like the Rebbe taught even little children to say, V'hinei Hashem nitzav alav, that means that the Eibishter is invested with his entire essence in every one of us, in every detail of our lives, in every aspect of every one of our struggles, and everything we go through. The battle of it determines, carries within itself the significance and the weight of the Eibishter Sovev of Kol Almin, and all of human and all of Jewish history and everything. If we live this way, we'll never underestimate the significance of our own battle, of our own Avodas Hashem. Have a wonderful week.